Hello everybody, welcome back to the Brothers Grimdark. It's another unit focus day, as you may be able to tell by the moody lighting. I'm going to be talking about Tyranids. They're one of my favorite armies, as you know. And today I'm going to be talking about perhaps the most quintessential Tyranid unit for my army. It's the Deathleaper, or Lictor, but I almost always use them as a Deathleaper. My army is very much focused around this kind of like alien xenomorph theme of sneaky aliens coming out of the shadows and then just absolutely destroying anything that's nearby and then slinking off again. And I don't think any Tyranid unit encapsulates that better than the Deathleaper. He's always been that like hunter in the shadows, sneaking up on people, ambushing. So he is absolutely perfect for the theme of my army. And yeah, he's just a really cool unit in general. On the sort of modeling perspective, I think he might be my favorite conversion in the army as well so far. I don't particularly love the current Finecast model for him. He's just very kind of stiff, and I always imagined them being much more slinky in the shadows, like as part of the terrain almost kind of thing, like hanging upside down from buildings or in trees or bushes. So I definitely wanted to incorporate a terrain element as part of him. So that was the first thing. And then from the body, I think I actually used the Broodlord as kind of the main piece of the body, but it was a bit more hunched over, a little bit more it felt like the pose worked a little bit better, not so just sort of stiff and upright. And I think that one of the cooler parts was actually Lyndon's idea. Was we came across this Age of Sigmar model. I think it's one of the Deepkin, who's got this octopus, and we came up with the idea of using that for his head. So he has this like octopus head, which has got all the tentacles and things. So they're much longer than the one on the kind of standard Lictor, and I think it's a really, really cool look. So yeah, he was a lot of fun to put together. Lots of different bits and pieces. I think his arms are maybe from the Tyrant Guard. So bits of Broodlord, bits of Tyrant Guard, bits of Terrain, bits of Age of Sigmar, a fair bit of green stuffing. I think I had to construct a couple of tentacles to kind of patch it all up again. But I'm really happy with how he turned out. I think he feels more like what I kind of imagine for that creature than the current model. I'm hoping he gets an update at some point. But I'm really, really happy with it. Forced me to come up with my own thing, which I'm super pleased about. On the table, he is pretty cool. As I said, I almost always run him as a Deathleaper. There's a couple of reasons for that. He went up a lot in price, so I am tempted to use a Lictor now instead. The Deathleaper originally, I think when the codex came out, was 90 points, and now he's 120, which feels like quite a hike, but when you see what he can do, it's understandable. I ran one game with him at 90, when he was 90 points, and I think he went through almost 3 times that in his damage output. He is really, really scary. And super flexible, so I'm not surprised he got the massive hike point. I still think he's really good at 120 points. To start with, Weapon Skill 2, as you kind of expect. He's Ballistic Skill 6, but he doesn't have anything to shoot, so who cares? Strength 7, not bad for a relatively smaller model. Again, I'm usually running him as Behemoth as well, so on the charge he's going to be Strength 8, which is great. Toughness 5, so he's survivable as a warrior, which is good, and 7 wounds. So he's tougher he's got more wounds than a Neurothrop. He takes a fair bit to take down. So, and 7 attacks to go along with that as well. So he's really an assassin. Like, he can hang out by himself. He doesn't really feel like he needs as much support from the rest of the army. It's very rare I put stratagems or anything on him. He's just out there to do his own thing, and he's strong enough, survivable enough by himself that he can get away with that. He's got a 4-up save, but it's an invul save. And he also has super chameleonic skin, which is cool as opposed to just the regular boring chameleonic skin that the Lictor has. So he's -1 to hit, which is great. And when he's in cover, he can't even be selected for a target attack if he's more than 12 inches away. So if he's already like difficult to hit in the first place, but if you need to get him away from things, you can just stick him in cover somewhere 12 inches away and you can't even be targeted. So really, really fun. He also has a bunch of like extra fluffy rules, which I think is great. Inhuman Swiftness, I think, is probably the most powerful. He basically gets fight first. So again, if he's going into just like regular-ish models, which don't have too many special abilities, almost always going to be hitting ahead of them with all those attacks. He's a real nasty monster. Also, enemy units cannot perform actions when they're within 6 inches of him. So again, if you get him on like something that's like holding a backfield objective, or maybe going off doing a side mission to do an action, raise a banner or something like that, he can just turn that off and say no. While he's in engagement range, you can't put stratagems on the unit against him, so you can't even like buff up a unit to fight back against him, which is really powerful. And yeah, finally Hidden Hunter, which is more his deep strike ability, so he can pop up at different points on the battlefield and in terrain, things like that. So he's got a lot of really good rules, along with a pretty solid stat line. So I think he's great from that. His weapons, that standard kind of AP -3, damage 2, which is pretty common across most of the Tyranid range. Again, pretty good for dealing with things like Marines. Like, he will go through a unit of intercessors by himself, which is fantastic. One thing which is also cool about him is, for an elite's choice, he can also have a warlord trait. It has to be the alien cunning one, but that makes sense, and it's really, really handy. It makes him obsec and count as 5 models. So again, if you think about it, him being one of these characters who can just pop up and take out one of those units that's kind of having to go do a sort of a side objective or hold a backfield objective or do something like that, he will go through a unit of 5 intercessors, or even if he takes down 2 or 3 of them, he'll then take the objective off them because he's obsec and he counts as 5. So if you're looking at like small-ish units, or even like a large unit of guardians, something like that, he can just pop out the shadows. He re-rolls his charges too with Behemoth, which is cool. So he's pretty reliably charging out a deep strike. And will just chew through units. He's obsec and, you know, can then steal stuff off people. He turns off actions. You can't use stratagems against units he's in combat with. So he's really, he's quite, you know, he's not something you're going to build your whole army around. You know, he's not a frontline warrior, but he's got a lot of utility and can really deal with some of those little pockets where you need help. And on top of that, he has a couple of cool stratagems. One of my favorite is Invisible Hunter, which basically means after he's come onto the table, the turns after that, you can just deep strike him somewhere else again. So he can, you know, pop up on one side of the table, deal with something, and then if he survives that, he can then pop up somewhere else and deal with some other problem. So he has a ton of flexibility. He can pop up all over the place. He can deal with little units by himself. He can even deal with fairly elite units. He can take out characters. He's just a really great assassin. He's maybe one of the better assassins in the game, I think, especially as a combat assassin. And he's relatively tricky to deal with, being -1 to hit all the time. He's got an invul save. He's got a ton of wounds. So yeah, he's cool. I like him a lot. And as I said, like, not just from his rules perspective, he also is very thematic for me. I think, as I said, I don't think I can think of a better unit that really encapsulates what my army is kind of about than the Deathleaper. I haven't tried running him as a Lictor yet. I did build my model, so he was kind of not really one or the other since he's a conversion. So I'm probably going to try him as a Lictor at some point because it's a lot cheaper. And you still get a lot of the rules. You don't get, his camouflage is not quite as good. He doesn't get some of the things like turning off the stratagems and things like that. He doesn't get obsec, but he's a lot cheaper. So I could probably get a couple of Lictors instead, or just squeeze one in maybe a little bit more easily into my army. So I'll try a Lictor at some point, see if it performs as well. But even with the points hike, I've been super happy with the Deathleaper in every game. He usually dies, but you kind of expect him to. He usually pops up, kills something important, and then will get gunned down or countercharged. But you know, even at 120 points, if he takes out a strategically important unit close to that points, he's more than made up for it. And again, because he's a deep striking unit who can reroll his charges, he's just, you know, you can't screen him out super easily, or if you do, you're having to spend a lot of your movement trying to work around him. So I like him from that point of view as well. You're forcing your opponent to kind of make decisions around him. So great unit, really cool conversion. I'm really happy with that. And a thematic unit and a good unit. So he checks all the boxes for me. He's like an all-star. And even from a gameplay perspective, I think most of the games we've played with him, he's been one of the best units on the table for me, even with the points. So that's my view on the Deathleaper. I think he's awesome. Maybe doesn't fit every person's theme or how they want to run Tyranids, but for me, I think he's a fantastic unit and fits with what I want to do with my army. So let me know what you think. Do you think the Lictors are actually a better choice now with what they can do? for the points, or do you think the Deathleaper with all those bonuses is still worth the 120 points he costs? Or do you think there's just better units out there that do the job, or do you think he's kind of unnecessary? Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. For now, for me, I think he's a great unit, but I'm going to play around with a couple different options for him. But expect to see him in most of my games in some form or another. But that's all for now. Hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and expect to see more content from the Brothers Grimdark again in the near future. Catch you later.